All right, everybody, let's get going. 6:30. On behalf of the Livermore parent community, I'd like to welcome our school board candidates, Superintendent Dr. Bowers and colleagues, school board members, district staff, and guests to the 2020 PCIC Candidate Forum. My name is Dave Von Heater, and this is my second year as chairperson of PCIC. I've served on 2 different site councils in our district for a number of years, participated on LCAP committees for 2 years. I'm currently the treasurer for an elementary PTO, serve as secretary for the Livermore Valley Education Foundation. I am a very proud member of the Livermore education community. As you may know, the Parent Club Information Council, or PCIC, is a nonpartisan group of leaders from parent groups from each of the 19 school sites in the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District, along with community partners and district leadership. The purpose of our group is to collaborate through the sharing and exchange of information with LVJ-USD and to move forward common goals to support the educational needs of all students. This evening, we are here to provide and moderate an open forum for 5 residents who are running for the 2 vacant 4-year terms on the LVJ-USD Board of Education. Our utmost gratitude and appreciation goes out to the candidates who have come forward and are willing to take on such an important role in our community. We hope through this forum that the Livermore community learns about and understands the interests, experiences, and educational perspectives of these candidates, and that the candidates glean information about the parent community as well. The format, which candidates receive beforehand, entails 9 questions, with each candidate being allowed 2 minutes to answer the first 8 questions and 3 minutes for the final question. These will be these will be displayed on screens around the room, and the answering order will be rotated for each question. Our timekeeper tonight will be PCIC member Susan Munker. Susan?
Candidates, I'm your timekeeper this evening. I will hold up a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining for response. I will then show a red card when your time is up and state, I am sorry, but time is up. Our moderator, Ellen Gould, will then ask the next applicant to begin, or she will pose the next question. Feel free to be as spontaneous as possible with your answers.
Audience, which is people that should be very familiar with this part. Please turn off your cell phones and remain quiet through the forum. Campaign material and contact information for each candidate is located on the table outside this room. For any additional questions you may have after the forum, you are welcome to contact candidates directly. Candidates, do we have any questions before we begin? Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ellen Gould. Ellen has been a Livermore resident for 21 years and involved with our schools for 18. She served as PCIC chairperson from 2010 to 2019 and PTSA president at Mendenhall Middle School. Ellen received the Livermore Management Association's Friend of Education Award in 2016 and also served on the Measure J campaign, Livermore Valley Education Foundation's Board of Directors, and school site councils. Ellen is now focusing on her real estate business and volunteers her free time on Livermore Shakespeare Festival's Board of Directors. Ellen.
Thank you, Dave. I don't have to yell. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here with question number 1. And we're starting with Christy Wang. Number 1, please introduce yourself and include your motivation for becoming a board member. What particular skills or experiences qualify you to serve as a school board member? Chris?
Okay. Hi, I'm Christy Wong, and I just realized I forgot to tell you my name was pronounced Wong, even though it's spelled with an A. So I've been a Livermore resident for 14 years. My husband, I moved here to raise our children, and my son was about to start kindergarten. And so when he started kindergarten, I joined the PTA, like a lot of parents do, and I signed up to be PTA rep to the school board. And they told me, we're not really sure what that job is. No one's wanted that for a long time. And so I started coming to school board meetings, and I got to really understand what school board is, what it does, who all the people are, who the different superintendents are. And it was a great introduction to school board, and also allowed me to start to get involved in the school district. In my children's early years in school, I spent a lot of time in the classrooms. I helped mostly with math and reading, and then I coached math team. But then eventually I started to get more involved in the district. I served on the technology committee with Jeff, and served on the Citizens Oversight Committee for a couple of years on the school bond measures. And the last 2 years, I fought youth vaping in Livermore, and so a lot of people think of me as the vaping lady, but I've actually done a lot in the school district prior to that. But that allowed me to really get to know our other city leaders, and then we eventually worked across throughout the Bay Area and in Sacramento, so I got to meet more people. But I also just start with a policy background. I have a bachelor's in education policy, a master's in public policy. I spent my career working on children, school, and family issues in the policy world, and so that's what I can bring to the school board.
Jack?
Hi, my name is Chuck Rogie. I am currently on the school board. I've been on the school board since 2008. What motivated me to run in 2008 was a school board that was somewhat in shambles. My understanding, and I wasn't in the back rooms, but there was shouting and so forth and so on. And I am a Livermore resident. I have been started at East Avenue School in kindergarten and finished at Livermore High School. I have a solid understanding of the school budgeting process. Because I'm an incumbent, I do have all these backgrounds. It provides me with the ability to research current and future educational trends, combine continuously to propose enhancement recommendations in these areas. I find that Livermore is an exemplary district. I'm proud to be part of it and proud to be a part of its successes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogie. Ms. Ewing? Did I say that right?
Hewing. You got it right. Hewing. Close enough. Good evening, everyone. My name is Candace Hewing. We first moved to Livermore in 1984. I attended Portola when that was a school, and moved on to Junction and graduated from Granada. I did have a speech impediment when I first came here, and my mom was able to get help advocating for me to participate in a speech program that we had, and I was able to graduate from that program. And without that help, I would not be where I am today. Once I finished here, like most people do, I went to Las Positas and then eventually transferred over to University of the Pacific, where I gained my degree in speech and language pathology. And again, all that is thanks to my speech and language pathologist. My daughter started school there when we still lived in Stockton as I finished school, and then we moved back to Livermore first chance we got, so that she could go to school home, well, where I call home. And once I was here and I realized that getting a master's degree in speech and language pathology was outside of my budget, I thought about what other degree or what other jobs I can have that would allow me to still help people in the capacity that I wanted to do that. And that's how I ended up in human resource at San Jose State University. My reasons for running for school board are so many of them. Number one, I just want to give back to the community that gave to me. Secondly, all of our kids are an investment, and I have two of those investments myself, one at Junction Avenue Middle School and one at Rincon. So I just want to make sure that I am doing the best I can to serve both my children and everyone in the community's children and give them the education that they deserve.
Thank you. Mr. Stroud?
Hi, I'm Asa Strout, Livermore native, daughter or father of a 3.5-year-old daughter, and a product of the Livermore School District, starting from Jackson Avenue to LHS, where I went on to go to school at Las Positas and then even go to school at Cal State East Bay. So fully educated in the East Bay. One of the reasons that were motivated me to run for school board is, my daughter. She's 3.5. A lot of times, members may run for school board after their kids are in the program and something happens that's like, a motivating factor within there. I'm running because there's an opportunity for me to help the school district where I can as a community advocate and as a technology professional to not only make the school district better for her, being a 3.5-year-old that will be in the school district if elected within my term, but for all the other students that are in here too. It allows you to get that perspective of what you can do. And as a community advocate for the last 4 years, after founding Unify Livermore and being a co-manager of the Yes on P campaign, I've really dedicated myself to giving back to Livermore, and I want to continue that community advocacy. So that's really at the crux of all this, where being a community advocate is about taking the voices that are behind you to where you're going to go. And when I, if elected, in this chair, I wouldn't just be my voice on the school board. It will be all the voices of the community that I plan to engage with to make our school district even better than it is today.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Yanira Guzman. Thank you, first of all, for hosting this event. So I have been a Livermore resident since 2006. I have two children both at Junction K-8. I have an elementary school student and a middle schooler. I am an educator. I'm a former teacher for elementary, taught in Hayward and Pleasanton, bilingual or dual immersion. And I was able to successfully transfer on to tech, where I still did the whole learning and teaching development piece for working with teachers across the nation and then working internally with sales team. I'm very passionate about education. My parents came to this country without having any education, or I shouldn't say that, with only having very limited. They only went up to the 4th grade. And when they came to this country, it was for us to do better, and us, my siblings and I. So education is the route for economic mobility. I was a low-income student, but I had teachers that advocated for me and that pushed me, that taught me what honors classes were, what AP classes were, that really guided me throughout the process. And I was able to go on to UC Berkeley. I got an undergraduate degree with sociology, and then I got a master's in education from San Francisco State University, which thus propelled me into the teaching field. I always, in the back of my head, there was a seed planted that I was going to run for school board. Like Asa said, I was going to do it when I was older, meaning my kids were out of school or retired. But I decided to do it because of COVID. And what COVID did and the pandemic did, it raised inequalities that are happening. Livermore did a great job, phenomenal, providing hardware and hotspots to our students, but there is still a divide just on knowledge on how to navigate the terrain. So I'm here for that.
Thank you very much. So for question number 2, we're going to start with Mr. Rogie. Question number 2. Let me put my glasses on. Describe your top 3 objectives if you are elected to the school board.
My top 3 objectives are to help guide the district through the COVID and get them back, all the kids back into school. That is probably takes care of number 1 and number 2 because it's such a big issue right now. And the third one is one of the things I'm part of in the school district right now is the policy committee, and I've seen a lot of work that needs to be done on the policies to streamline them, to make them less cumbersome, and that has been one of my goals. I've been on policy for a couple of years now, and it's starting to come to fruition, and I want to see it completed. But going back to 1 and 2, it's getting kids back into school. That's been the biggest issue since March, and I think we all know why. How we're going to do it, that's the big question. There are many things kicking around, but we are at the mercy of the health department and several regulations, and if it was up to me, I'd bring the schools back tomorrow, all the kids back tomorrow. It's not up to me. I'm part of a board that has 1 vote for 1 member. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for me, my top 3 objectives are, I would start with safety, kind of going along with the COVID thing, right? We can't teach our kids in an environment that's not safe. We're currently doing the best we can with distance learning and, staying home with our kids and helping them out and things like that. But as far as safety, that's not the only safety issue we have. Obviously, it's keeping them safe from online things now that they're spending so much time online. It's keeping them safe from bullying and feeling like they have a safe space to go to while we're kind of in this lockdown still. It's making sure that they're able to talk to their parents about things that they're not comfortable with and talking to teachers if they don't have a safe space with their parents. So safety would definitely be number 1. My second objective is definitely equity, and that goes for our students and our teachers alike. Right now, I feel like, how Yanira said, we really need to make sure that we are bringing all of our kids up to a level where they are at the same level of understanding and the same level of assistance if that's what they need. And then my third objective would be whole child development, meaning making sure, again, that they are able to stay in a mindset where they're learning from schools in multiple ways, not just education-wise, but also they're learning how to engage, whether it be online. Once we're in person, we're going to have to work on that all over again, and things such as that. So those would be my 3 top objectives.
Thank you. Mr. Strout?
So I think, anyone running for elected office this year, if safety is not their number one issue right now, they shouldn't be running. So my number one issue is also safety, but that safety doesn't start and end with COVID-19. So, when it comes to COVID-19, we're going to listen to, make sure we're listening to the state, the county, and medical experts. But school safety also is going to have to be a focus after COVID-19 when students are getting back on campus. Within Livermore, there are examples of racism and sexual harassment and abuse on campus, and we need to address those safety concerns, because anytime our students have an anxiety or feel unsafe going to campus, they're not going to perform as well. And when they don't perform as well, it perpetuates the educational gap. And that's on top of just the fact that racism, sexual harassment, and abuse has no place on campus. So, we need to make sure that we're working with each school, with the parents, with the greater community to talk about how to prevent those. And so we've got to work with those affected communities to come up with a program to do that. Go to my second one, honesty, transparency, and accessibility really are my second one, where as a community advocate, I talk to anybody and everybody about trying to find out what issues are important to them. And I feel like we need someone like that on the school board who's going to reach out to all our parents, our teachers, our district staff, and in some instances, our students, to make sure that the issues that are important to them are being addressed as well. And then lastly, I think the third issue that I'm going to be running on, I have 4 main ones, but the third one is addressing the inequity within Livermore. You ask anybody who is moving to Livermore, they get told the same thing. You need to live in the southwest side of town to go to the best schools. That involves community engagement to change the perception in town, to address inequity, to make sure the students are going to, or parents feel like their students can go to anywhere and be successful. But it also means addressing the inequities that are at those schools that parents are avoiding.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman?
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm going to reiterate what my colleagues said about safety. That is the main concern. But also, too, is just communication with the multiple populations that we have and the multiple families that we have. How can we make sure that we are asking the right questions and that we're actively looking to engage with the various populations? That's the first thing. The second thing is, again, access, and that has to do, again, with equity. Just making sure we're doing our best to make it not just the core curriculum accessible, but all the communications that as a district that we are sharing with the larger community, how to locate resources, how to advocate for oneself and one's child, how to know all the intricacies, all the cultural capital that comes with navigating our educational system in this country. Third thing is partnerships. How can we leverage partnerships, both corporate, private, nonprofit, to build programs? How can we leverage their funding to fund programs when we're strapped for cash? So, using my experience in building partnerships and working with tech, working in nonprofit, private, working with our four-year universities or community colleges, our private universities here, we have a lot of wealth and knowledge within Livermore. So how do we, again, leverage that so that we can better the entire ecosystem, which our students, our families are a part of?
Thank you very much. Christy, hang on just a moment, and Dave has something to say.
Candidates, when you're answering your question, obviously the masks muffle quite a bit. Please make sure you bring the microphone to your mouth or speak into it as best you can so the mic can pick it up clearly. Thank you. I think everybody can probably do a little closer job to that. Yep, thank you.
Great. Ms. Wong, have you answered? Oh, say that again? Oh, I haven't answered. Oh, it's a new question?
No.
Yeah.
Do I
It's the same
answer the
question,
previous
yeah.
one?
Yes.
Okay.
Go back to question number 2. There you go.
Top 3 objectives. Well, I think anyone involved with schools this year, the main objective is getting through COVID. I think we need to keep communicating with teachers and parents and students on how distance learning is going so we can make adjustments as needed. We haven't done this before. And then figuring out how to get the kids back in school. I've been paying a lot of attention to other districts that are bringing kids back and how they're doing it and what's working, what's not working, so we can learn from other people's successes and mistakes. And then preparing for the budget shortfalls to deal with all of this. That's where my policy experience and my relationships with people in Sacramento will be very helpful in my knowledge of the process. And also having spent my career in nonprofits, I know about corporate partnerships and the grants and, creative ways to get money. The second thing would be just guiding our schools through this national conversation on civil rights, which is a big deal for kids. I have 2 teenagers. They care about this a lot. Their friends care about this a lot. I went to a lot of these rallies and protests they did last spring. And through my vaping work, I work with kids a lot, and it's something they care about. And our state superintendent is going to issue guidelines on ethnic studies in the spring that we'll have to implement. And I think I want to have a seat at the table. And I have a lot of ideas about recruiting teachers of color to our district. And I'm serving on both the district and the cities. They have different names, but they're basically the committees on racial justice and gender equality issues. And then the third thing is kind of my bucket of all the ideas that I've gotten from 13 years of being a parent into this district, just to enhance all the great things that we do here already. We have a lot of great things, and I love that we serve all kinds of students. I have so many ideas for math and shop and IEP students. I've talked to a lot of parents during this time, and the people with the problems are usually the ones with the solutions, and I have a lot of great specific ideas on programs. And so to enhance our district's mission would be my third objective.
Thank you very much. So we're moving on to question number 3, and the first to answer will be Ms. Ewing. Question number 3. What do you see as the current challenges facing public education in our state?
So I'm going to go ahead and state the obvious, but COVID is definitely the current challenge facing our state. Like Mr. Rogie said, of course we want to get our students back as soon as possible, but we have to wait. We don't get to just decide those things here ourselves. It is what the state has to say, and so we are waiting on that. Other than that, another thing that we should definitely start addressing immediately is equity. And the way that we do that is by elevating our students who are struggling. It's by bringing in extra communication strategies with our parents. So one of the things a friend and I were talking about the other night is, yes, our teachers do an excellent job with all the Zoom meetings and all of the projects and all of the things that they have to do in order to keep our kids level with where they were currently as far as learning. But what are the extra tools that we can do? Can we provide tutoring via Zoom? How do we go about pulling resources for that? Because I really think that once COVID is over or we go to our new normal, our kids are going to need help catching up from where they were. So I think that that's definitely an issue that if we start thinking about it now, by the time we're able to return to school, we will have a plan on how to make sure that all our kids are brought up to that level.
Thank you. Mr. Strzok.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to repeat, obviously COVID-19, biggest challenge across the state and across the nation right now when it comes to education and how to effectively do the education. So I think having spoken to some of the teachers, they're doing a great job adapting and making sure that they're reaching their kids. But a lot of them are worried about possibly opening up too soon, and so that's why it comes back down to, or even from a hybrid scenario where hybrid may not be effective, where they are treating some kids online, they're giving them attention, and they can't give the attention to the in-person students and vice versa. And so they're concerned about the reopening plan as well. So I think we need to make sure that even when the state and the county and our medical professionals say we're good to go, that the plan that we have with it is the right plan, because the last thing we want to do is to have to pull that string back and close up, and that's going to cause a dramatic amount of chaos throughout the school system. So I think that's what we're dealing with today in terms of COVID. Probably one of the biggest ones is dealing with COVID, and then how do we reopen? And then underneath all that, is the inequity problem. We have we have hotspots going out to students, but there are students in our rural communities that don't get cellular service. So a cellular hotspot isn't effective. So, and the districts tried to do some creative ways of getting internet service out there to them, but it's not easy because it's the rural area. It's not easy to do a lot of things involving technology out there. So it's about how do we assess those students in need, and then we look at all their needs in terms of like students with suboptimal learning conditions. I was raised by a single mom of 3. Zero chance at home learning would be as successful as in person. So those are the considerations that we also need to look at. But also on top of that is this next year there's going to be a massive budget shortfall. The recession's hitting California like it is everywhere else, and the next cycle of school year is going to have really a hard educational conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Money? Okay. Again, the obvious, as everyone said, is COVID, and how do we get our students back on campus? But I'm more concerned with, we have the immediate effects because we're already losing students. We have, even if they're a two-parent household, many of the two parents are working outside of the home, and we have youngsters. Are we making an assumption that they're logging on every day and that they're navigating? With me who works in tech, and I still kind of struggle sometimes with some of the programming that crashes, and I got to get my son on. So these are, and I say it from a point of privilege that I know how to do this stuff. So that's the issue, but I'm really concerned about the long-term effects of COVID and long-distance learning, because this gap is widening between those that can navigate and work from home and can do this, stay home with their children, versus those that cannot because of just the reality of having to pay their bills outside by leaving the home. So what can I, how can I help do that? And so I've been trying to just develop quick and dirty tutorial videos in English and Spanish, trying to just push those out. And I'm getting calls, and I'm getting callbacks from parents saying, thank you, but can you walk me through it? They're trying to handle long distance through a smartphone. And they don't have, there's fear of touching the Chromebook that the school district provided their child because they don't want to break it and then mess it up for their child. So I'm thinking long term. Yes, we want to get back into what we called normal, but how can we really build plans and strategy to change the long-term effects of this, the consequences?
Thank you. Ms. Wong.
It's hard when you're the fourth or fifth person to answer to say something different when it's so clear the 800-pound gorilla in the room is COVID. And budget issues are probably the biggest one on the table, and because that affects everything and how we're getting kids back. And when they come back, they're not who they were in March. They come with all kinds of new issues. And the learning gaps, they're there for every student, more for some than others, but I would say there's some amount of a learning gap for everyone. It's impossible to get in the amount of teaching you would do in person for 6-7 hours a day, and now to do it for just a few hours. Teachers aren't able to get all of that teaching in. So how are we going to make that up? That's a question. And then you have kids coming back with social and emotional issues. Their parents and teachers have social and emotional issues. These are big challenges, and a very specific challenge in bringing kids back to school, because there are certain criteria we have to meet to get them back in, masking, distancing, all of that. But another key piece is testing. How do we get enough tests? How do we pay for them? How do we get results back fast enough? That's a big challenge, and one that's likely the major showstopper in terms of getting kids back in. So even when there's a green light to come back, there are specific issues we'll have to deal with. But I think longer term, it's the learning gaps, it's the budget issues, and I've had a lot of meetings with parents of students on IEPs, and there are a lot of issues to deal with when they come back to school, and there's been regression. So yeah, some real challenges ahead, and then, which is also why I wanted to to be here, to get a seat at the table. I'm someone who's been very involved in the community. I've always, and especially the last few months, spent a lot of time talking to parents and teachers and students themselves about the issues that they're dealing with.
Thank you. Mr. Rogie?
What they all said, because you're right, when you go fifth, it's kind of hard. The current challenges that we're facing in the state are economic. Job loss, companies moving out of state, companies closing, mental illness, mental issues. 25% of kids under the age of 25 are considering or contemplated suicide. The isolation of the pandemic, the education gap, where kids left off in school, and is it being made up? Obviously, the budget. The budget is going to be a big deal. But those are things that are statewide. What I'm worried about as a board trustee for this district are basically the same things. How do we bring our kids back? What are we doing about mental illness? What are we doing about the social emotional needs of our teachers and our staff? The pressures are huge. We're trying to do distance learning for something that we've never really done before. It was thrown at it, thrust at us. The state says you're going to do this. It's a money issue. We've got to get this going. And at the same time, we want to bring kids back. It's going to be parallel systems. Not everybody's going to want to come back. We're going to have to do a hybrid. And at some point, again, we're going to have to be looking at money. So there's a triad of things that are going on that challenges the state, but I'm more interested in what our challenges are and how we're going to take care of them in this district. Thank you.
That's a wonderful segue to question number 4, which possibly, now that I think about it, may be a little bit redundant, but we're going to go with it. Question number 4, the first to answer will be Mr. Strout. Given our state's challenges, what are 2 to 3 needs that must be priorities for our district to address? Why do you see these as needs?
Yeah, so I think the biggest need is making sure that our reopening plan, when we are ready, is airtight, right? Because like I said, we don't want to implement it too soon. We don't want to implement it too late, because if we implement it too soon, we're going to have to pull the string back and put our kids and our parents back to remote learning when they may have made plans to do otherwise, and it's just kind of creates a chaotic environment for the household. But we don't want to do it too late, too, for the exact same reasons where we talk about, Mr. Rogie or Trustee Rogie mentioned the mental issues and mental health considerations that are happening with our students and within our parents and our teachers, because, we want to make sure that the timing is just right, because we don't want to have that environment continue so that it continues to affect our students, parents, teachers, and staff. So I think that's probably, the absolute biggest one. And then, the second one is going to be, budgeting during a recession. One of the things that I am very considerate about at work within my profession is making sure that we're spending the right amount of money. We're not overspending money. As a IT professional, we purchase a lot of stuff at companies, and it's all about making sure that we're not overspending and we're right-sized for what we're asking for. And it's going to take somebody, who has familiarity with budgeting to really make sure that we are successful with our budget. And there are considerations that I'm not very familiar with school budgeting, because it is very different than business budgeting, but I work at a financial company. It's kind of in our blood. And the third is, making sure as we go through this and go into the new year, is that our students are being addressed properly during remote learning. We make sure that the inequity is being addressed, the educational gap is being addressed to make sure that it's being, not increasing, or in all likelihood, not increasing as much as it could, by making sure that we're actively working with the students and actively working with parents to make sure that there's involvement from the community for our students.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman?
Yeah, same thing. It's reopening safely, but there are budget issues, there are health issues, the mental and health issues of our students, of our families, of our teachers. How do we address that? How do we, again, make sure that we provide enough resources, and they don't always have to be district resources. Again, I'm going to go back to like partnerships and how do we just make that available, promote it in different mediums and different avenues, and ask the community. I believe it was Ms. Wong that said, you know, the people that have the problem will often have the solution. But in order for us to raise that, we need to ask. We need to make that ask and make them feel welcome. Make them feel welcome that they can attend a board meeting or however it is. So again, I think it's just what are the priorities of our district is making sure that we not only say we're open to communicate, but providing opportunities for that communication to happen. So I'm going to give an example that the city of Livermore, they just did on Friday. They had the Human Services Division. They did a meeting for the Spanish-speaking community, and to hear what the Spanish-speaking community, they were just first of all grateful and said that this hasn't been done before, and we want to thank you for doing that. And so, how can we just do things a little bit differently or promote? So that we get, and again, for the other languages too, we have other, it's not just the Spanish-speaking community, but, you know, special needs, other students of color, you know, gender, sexuality. How are we actively looking to hear from them?
Thank you. Ms. Wong.
I won't rehash all the things I already said earlier about COVID and racial justice, which I think are the two top things that we'll be addressing this year, mostly from external things outside of our district that are happening statewide and nationally. But maybe to spin this in a little more of a positive way, instead of a need, kind of an opportunity, which is that we've been forced to learn and come up with some surprising new ways to educate and communicate that actually are working better than the traditional methods. And I'd like to see us hold on to those things and find ways to incorporate them. This was a great opportunity for us to sort of break everything and try to rebuild it. And so things like, you know, PTO meetings being more highly attended because they're virtual, or, you know, some of the IEP students, parents that I spoke with, said some of the technology stuff actually works better for their kids, and especially kids with kind of social anxiety issues. Remote learning has worked better, but then the challenge is if they want to remain remote when the other kids go back to school, how do we kind of make that work for everybody? So I'd like to take this as an opportunity to think about maybe better ways that we've been forced to learn to educate our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Rogi.
Well, I won't rehash the COVID issue also, but it is a priority. One of the other priorities I've noticed is because of distance learning, the pressure that is put on our teachers to learn something new that they've never had to learn before, and the pressure to deliver it cleanly. I think that the teachers are under a lot of pressure, and our senior staff is also under a lot of pressure to put something out there that is going to be equal to on-campus learning. Whereas we've never had that issue before. So that might be the new normal on how we do things. I don't like new normal. I like to go back to normal, but that's up for definition by just about anybody at this point. The other priorities that we have in our district are also going to have to be the budget, and I think we do pretty well as a district in our budget. But we do deal with grants, and we partner with other industries throughout the year. There's so many I can't even tell you this to what they go to. LVEF is one of our biggest partners who raises money for Chromebooks or sports or whatever. We have just received a check from Wente Wineries and also the wine auction that they had. These are all partnerships that we have, and they go right to our students. The other priority that I see that we've got to deal with is with our students. There are some students that are going to do well in this learning distance learning. There are others that need socialization, and it's a big priority. The other one is also their gaps. Again, I mentioned that earlier, but I'm concerned about our gap education and how we're going to deal with that. Some don't see it as an issue, some do. Parents have already asked me about it, that their student is not where they should have been. So we have a lot, more than 2 or 3, trust me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewing?
So for me, the 2 priorities that I see once we start transitioning back are going to be communication and support. Starting with communication, I just think that it's really time to get to know our community again, whether that's through surveys, which I think might be better than just a Zoom meeting to talk about it, because people have a chance to think about what it is that they want to say. They have a chance to maybe discuss with their families what kind of communication they would want to see go forward. Philomena is great at sending out emails and getting that information out that way, but a lot of parents get so many emails throughout the day that they don't always have a chance to sit down and read those. So I've been really doing my best to share that information when I get it, whether it be social media or some of the parent friends that I have, making sure that they're aware and that they know. And I think going forward that just needs to be understood that, look, we can't do this without you. We're a team. Everybody needs to be involved in the decision-making process. And that second one being support is our teachers are overloaded right now with everything that they're having to learn and go through and change and rethink because of what's all happened. And, they don't even get to have the parent in the classroom support that they used to have, right? They're literally doing this all by themselves. And while I think they're great at doing it, they need help. And whether they're openly saying it or it's just an observation or just knowing teacher friends and knowing what it's like to put together a lesson plan, it's something that I really take seriously, and I really want to make sure that they're getting all of the help that they need.
Thank you. Is everybody doing okay? Take a sip of water. Everything's good? Okay, so we'll move on to question number 5. An individual school board member has no authority. Only the board as a whole can make decisions for our district. What skills or traits will allow you to contribute to effective operations of the board as a whole? Ms. Guzman.
Yes. So one would be communication, but I'm also a project manager. And the reason I bring this up is because as a project manager, you build a team and you have a set goal, you have a vision. And, some of my great friends, colleagues too, they give me the code name or the nickname of Taskmaster because I'm really great at implementing vision. So I think that's a skill, that's a trait that I have in the sense, if we have a vision as a school board, as a community, my skill set, my gift is that I know how to identify the appropriate people with their strengths, pull them together so that we can move forward and we can get to what we want to do. The ability to communicate. And part of that is probably my ability that I'm able to network with others. And again, still, whether we're looking at it as an organization as opposed to an individual, this organization is known to do this. Let's pull them in to implement our vision. So that's how I contribute to the unit, to the board, is that I can help go further and maybe on a quicker time frame. That's, operation-wise. Project manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wong.
Forgetting to turn it on. So I've spent my professional career and a lot of my personal volunteer time as an advocate, and I've worked on some very contentious issues on China's human rights abuses, on domestic violence. I worked on both at the national policy level and then also almost 10 years now as a volunteer advocate at Tri-Valley Haven. And then I fought big tobacco. I've worked on very contentious issues. And so I'm used to working in those environments, and I have an ability to find common ground with people. I'm very collaborative in how I work. If you see the number of public officials who endorse my candidacy because they've worked with me and they know how I work and how I find common ground, and I work in a very supportive, collaborative way. Even though I've worked on contentious issues and I can't go there when I need to, that's not how I operate. And so I think that collaborative spirit is very effective. In terms of helping the board be effective, because we're not dictators, we serve our public. Some of it's getting the public on board with what you want, and there my public relations background comes in very handy. I also have spent a lot of time doing public relations work and just helping the community to focus on issues that are important and leading people to what you are trying to accomplish. That's also a very important, useful tool in my toolbox.
Thank you. Mr. Rogie.
I've got a lot. Okay. I'm just kidding with you. Everybody's got to lighten up a little bit. Skills and traits. First off, I've been on the school board for 12 years. I've developed some skills and traits that I didn't have when I came on board. But one of my basic traits is to research and look for problems and look for positives on anything that we work at. I like the debate. I like the discussion when we do have them on certain issues. Sometimes not on the side that wins on a school board vote, but I want the issues to and its ugliness or its positiveness to be out there for the public. I always want the public to know what we are doing. My background also is I was a fire captain. I was a project manager in a software company. I was a truck driver. I've been the route. I've seen a lot of industries, and part of that skill and trait is to be able to walk around a school and see different things for what they are. I've taken my background, my varied background, and apply it to issues. And I think that makes me a more well-rounded school board member to be able to see these things and to contribute a solution and point out a problem or say, this is great. And I think that's what's really needed. And I think anybody up here on the dais can do that too. So, but I've got some skills and backgrounds that I've developed over 12 years, and I think they were very effective and help with an effective school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewing.
Well, there's no I in team and there's no I in school board. When it comes to the school board, I obviously think it's great that not one person has a say-so. Like Christy said, this is no dictatorship. Everyone's opinions matter, and you never know whose idea is going to be the one that helps you, further progress within the school board. Growing up, when you're forced to do group projects, you learn to work with people. You learn that just because you think something is a good idea doesn't mean that's as far as it needs to go. And being on a school board with all those different ideas and all those different brains working together, you can come to a solution. And you don't have to agree on the best course of action. You just have to agree that an action needs to take place. And I think that's what's really going to keep the school board and the school district running strong and well, as long as people are willing to listen and communicate effectively with one another. I think we'll be fine. So in college, when we were doing things like this and working on programs to get our students speaking in a way that they were comfortable or helping them articulate words and things like that, it was a group project and a group process in which we made sure that what we were doing was always was best for our student at the time. And the same thing in my current job at SJSU is I'm not the one who makes all the decisions. It's a group of us who comes together and says, what's the best way to effectively communicate this information? And what is going to be best for our employee? So bringing all of those skills to the table of school board.
Thank you. Mr. Stroud.
Yeah, so Over the last 10 years in my professional career, I've worked in business operations and I've worked in IT managing business applications and making sure that they run efficient. So over the last 10 years, my entire job was basically making sure the companies I worked for ran efficiently. So in order to do that, much just like at the school board, you can't do that by yourself. It requires a lot of collaboration, working from teams from finance to, sometimes the CEO, to engineering, to the support staff, just to make sure that what you want to do, what your initiative is bought in. Because if you're to do it by yourself, without the proper buy-in, you are not going to get it done. Anybody who's worked at a private company will tell you that there's as much politics there as there is in actual politics. So my professional experience definitely helps to give me that critical eye about being collaborative and working with the rest of the school board members, but also just looking at these nuances of implementing technology applications, looking for these efficiencies in business processes. And I can take those skills and apply it to some of the decisions that we make within the school board. But first and foremost, I'm a community advocate. I was born in Livermore. I've been volunteering in Livermore since, I was in Cub Scouts. So I don't know, 5 or 6. I don't know. And since then, I've started multiple organizations, from the Tri-Valley Rotaract Club to Unify Livermore to being actively engaged with the Yes on P campaign. And by doing that, I've also done the same. Being willing to collaborate, willing to talk to everybody is so important, because that's how you get that buy-in. And we can see it within our community, where more and more people are aware of these issues that are important to Livermore. And I want to take that community advocate skill set of raising issues and getting people on board with these issues to the school board, so we can start doing the same thing here. And it may not be an issue, it just may be a policy that we want to do. Getting people aware and getting people into the conversation and understanding how to talk to people, what's important to them versus what's important to the next person, but where's that common ground that makes that policy successful. Thank you.
Please make sure you respect the red card. Thank you. Please make sure you respect the red card, please.
Thank you. So moving on to question number 6. We're halfway there. You're almost over halfway there. Exciting. Miss Wong, understanding that distance learning is very new, if you are elected, what recommendations would you make as a board member to better serve our students and families?
As I said earlier, I think there are some things about distance learning that seem to be working better for some of our students. And so I've had a lot of conversations. The way I've been campaigning is I've been convening what I call listening sessions, because, like I said, this is how I'm going to learn what the problems are, and it's also how I learn what the solutions are. And so I've heard from a lot of kids and parents and teachers about things that are working for them and things that are not, and they have ideas about tweaks that can be made right now while we're doing mostly remote learning, and then eventually as people come back. I think just staying in communication with the people that are using the technology and are trying to, whether they're the students or the teachers, and then just hearing from them about what kinds of things are working that we can incorporate as we move back on campuses.
Thank you. Mr. Rogi.
Interesting question. I've been interviewed by several students in the last couple of weeks, and one student is a freshman at Granada, so I happened to ask him while he was interviewing me, I happened to ask him about how he's doing at Granada and how the distance learning. Well, he only knows distance learning. He doesn't know anything else at this point. And if he was to go through 4 years of this, he wouldn't know what normal was for high school prior to this. To make recommendations to better serve our students is, I don't know, because everything's in flux. It changes from week to week. We, as a district, and as of many districts, don't have all the skills we need to make distance learning work 100%. The families are also suffering from that. Again, we have technology issues. But I really don't have great answers for this, because next week this answer could be totally not worth the words I'm using. But I do see the outcome of this is some of our classes will be shown, at least in the high school area, that we could do this on distance learning all the time and incorporate it into our curriculum and make it more of a standard, whereas other classes are obviously going to have to be in person. I see in the future, inside of 3 years, that a hybrid learning situation will be standard in most high schools. Because it's going to work, and we've invested our money into it, and some teachers and stuff are going to thrive in it. Some students are going to thrive with it. And so with that, I don't have great answers, but again, ask me next week, I could have a really great answer.
That's fine, thank you. Ms. Ewing?
One of the things that I've talked about with some of my teacher friends, and I don't want to put any additional work on teachers at all. So maybe they can find maybe a parent within their class who excels at using computers and working with the distance learning programs like Schoology and things like that, and have them provide a YouTube video or some sort of tutorial that parents or students can watch that kind of helps them walk through the process of doing it. Like Yanira said before, it's going to create a gap in learning if they can't figure out the essentials or the basics. If they don't know how to get onto a program, how can they turn their work in on time? They won't be able to. So I think if we maybe start having some tutorials. Miss Kelly Bowers is great at being in videos. I've seen her on YouTube all the time creating different videos. So she can maybe create a video or have some students who are taking a class in videography or things like that shoot videos so that they can assist people in how to work with distance learning.
Thank you. Mr. Stroud?
Yeah, so one of the main things that they really reinforce in the Boy Scouts is to be prepared, right? So when it comes to distance learning and it comes to the district is to be prepared for, as Trustee Rogi was mentioning, for things to change. And so that's not to say to have a plan for everything, because you don't want to waste a bunch of time and resources making a plan that will never come to pass, or multiple plans that will never come to pass, but it's to be prepared for things to change on a dime and to be prepared to move quickly to then come up with a plan that we can then implement sooner rather than later. And so I think that also happens for our teachers. But what does that look like when it comes to our teachers being prepared? It is the training. So there's a lot of new stuff happening. We need to make sure that the teachers, the training that they're getting for these new applications are being reinforced. It's also training that as we are moving through distance learning, that we convey with them and work with other districts to know what's working, what's not. And it's almost like collaborative training between these districts so they can share their ideas, and so that all the teachers can start doing a better job, because, one thing may be doing really well at this one school that's not being cheerleaded enough, and then we just need to share that with the rest of our teachers. So being prepared in that sense is drastically important. And it's also, being prepared for our students. Like, we need to have our students, who are older and, at some point more experienced at doing this, talking to the younger ones saying like, hey, it's going to get better. Like, we need to prepare them mentally for what's happening. Like, it's not going to be great, but we need to make sure that we are preparing them for this in the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman?
Yes, thank you. So I agree, everyone is working their best, teachers, students, the families at home. But I do think that distance learning is widening the gap, whether we really want to admit that or not, the educational gap. And Ms. Wong had said she does listening conversations, and I think that's a great start, just listening to, again, our families and our students. What is it, I don't have the answer to this today, but something that we learn in the tech space is that you host user groups. When you're building a product, when you're building a solution, you listen to the users that it's made for, and you design toward their needs. Well, our users, in a sense, are our students. I mean, we are here to serve them, and we are here to serve their families. So we need to start there, as well as our teachers. Everyone who has that first touch with the student, how do we serve them? And it's multiple perspectives. So we need to figure out how do we serve all those and listen to all those multiple perspectives and come up with a cohesive plan that we can pivot at any moment, you know, plan A, plan B, plan C. That's my recommendation.
Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to question number 7, I believe. Yes, 7.
It's a big
It's a
one.
little long,
Yes.
but bear with me here. Mr. Rogie is number 1 on this question. As our nation grapples with matters of race, gender, and socioeconomic biases and equity, so does the Livermore School District. There have been some steps made to make our school district more inclusive and to ensure that all staff and student interactions are safe and respectful so that the best learning and working environment is fostered district-wide. As there is much more work to do, as a trustee, what would be some of the actions you would take to further promote a healthy learning climate for traditionally marginalized groups?
First off, as a board member, I don't get to take actions. I get to vote on them that are submitted to the board. So with that in mind, we have, as a board and as a district, have, as they said, introduced programs and the such to help to further these learning climates. Some of the past things we've done, and I've noticed, is that, say, these special ed, the Shooting Stars out of Livermore, was a cheerleading team that was started by the students. What I've noticed that what's most successful is when students themselves actually motivate and initiate these programs. Over at Granada, there was a drama teacher who started, it was a black production, I don't remember the name of the play, but asked black students to be part of that, and it was very successful. So a lot of this has to come from within. It's hard for myself to go to all the schools and see what's going on. I have to hear from parents, I have to hear from students, but I also notice that some of the most successful programs have come from within the schools themselves and the students, and then blossomed out when it worked out really well to other schools, to other areas. So I'll just go with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Ewing.
Rereading the ending of that question, what steps would you take to further promote a healthy learning climate for traditionally marginalized groups? So I think the first step in everything is acknowledgement. I think that we've had a hard time acknowledging some of those marginalized groups that exist. And it's just not, centralized to race. There are other things. And yes, I see that gender and socioeconomic biases are up there. But even things just as suicide groups, too. We have to include them in these conversations. So I think once we acknowledge, we can start to have better conversations. And even if we go the route of looking into curriculum, maybe part of closing that gap would be providing them with resources that they may not know, things that weren't previously taught in history, whether that applies to gender or race. We have a curriculum that I learned that is still the same curriculum that's being taught today. It doesn't seem to be updated. It doesn't seem to have changed. We need to do things like acknowledge the land that we're currently on, who it used to belong to, and educate our kids on that. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. And giving them a sense of belonging. No matter what that group is, they need to feel that, hey, Livermore has a bunch of different people. Where do I belong? They need to find out where they belong and have somebody support that area of their lives. And I think once they have that, they're going to be more successful because they're going to feel more comfortable in their skin and they're going to feel supported. And I think that's very important in a child's development.
Thank you. Mr. Stroud.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest conversations to have that any school board, school district, teachers, and students can have. And I think that's one of the main things that we need to do going forward is to, have that conversation. Because, as Candace had just mentioned, if you don't acknowledge it, you don't acknowledge the problem, you don't acknowledge the issue, then people don't know it exists. Because some people are busy doing their day-to-day, just taking care of their kids, taking care of their house, and they're focused primarily on what they're working on. So it's an information effort, which as a community advocate, I know firsthand what it takes to reach out to the community and make sure everyone is aware that these issues around race, gender, and socioeconomic inequalities are in the community. Because as we get the community more aware of the issues, they'll be more willing to step up and help. But what does that look like, right? So the first and foremost, on top of getting the community involved, it's making sure that we're talking to those who are in those communities and who are affected by some of the issues or the conversations that they're having within their own groups, and make sure that we're having those conversations and just talking to each other within that and getting their feedback. Because any program that's going to solve racism on campus that doesn't involve those communities who are being impacted by the racism isn't going to be successful. You can't just talk to people who look like myself and expect to get a significant program developed around addressing race. But there's also the curriculum. I think that's really important. There's the part about history, making sure that history is being taught front to back. Black history is American history, Indigenous history is American history, and to reserve it for only small chunks of the school year is not okay. And I'll end with, we also need to look at how we modernize our sex education program that addresses the LGBT plus community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate what Mehdi said here. Do not shy away from the difficult conversations. They need to be had. There are many people within our community, depending whichever, they could be facing gender, race, because we're so multifaceted, so socioeconomic, all these things, and there is a hurt there. And when we don't discuss it, we are belittling, we are making, we are devaluing someone's perspective and actually just someone's life, to be real. And I'm going to say that, as much as we think we're protecting our children from having these conversations, I have to just be real with you. I don't have live TV at home. We got rid of cable a long time ago, and yet my 7-year-old knew about George Floyd. And I was trying to not have that conversation with him. I was having it with my middle schooler. But that's our reality. And so, I had that race conversation with him, with both my children. And, also with sexuality and gender, LGBT, it's in our family. We got to talk about it. So don't shy away from the conversations, but there are ways to have age-appropriate conversations about these heavy topics. And again, that's, we can do that in school, I feel. We can do that. We can, again, tap in with our communities and help us assist carry this conversation to the forefront and just be open about it. And again, as Ms. Candace said, acknowledgement is huge.
Thank you. Ms. Wong.
So as I said earlier, I'm on both the city and the district's committees to address racial justice issues. And I'm someone who's a skeptic of committees. When the response to a problem is, let's form a committee. That is where you have to start if you're a governing body, an organization, a corporation, but we have to be clear that that's the means to a solution. The committee itself is not the solution. And so having spent a lot of years working in Washington, D.C., there are two types of legislation, resolutions and amendments. Resolutions are words, amendments are action. And I want to make sure that what comes out, and that's why I'm happy to be on both committees, is that the result is action, that we're not just going to put out some nice words and say, here's the mission of our city, or here are our goals, that the real action comes from it. And how you make sure that it addresses traditionally marginalized groups is that they're given a seat at the table. And then they're listened to. You don't just bring them in, let them talk and say, okay, thank you, pat them on the back and send them out the door. We have to really listen. And part of it is that people of color have to have a seat at the decision-making table. And having talked to Candace and then hearing Yanira speak tonight, I think it's not a coincidence that 3 women of color have decided to run for school board. It's because of what's been happening in this national conversation on civil rights, that we're coming out of our comfort zone to do this very strange thing called running for office. So that's it. Just listen to the people, the traditionally marginalized groups, and take action.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 8. How should you, as a school board member, go about gathering information and knowing what the parents and community in the district are thinking? How will you discern these sources of information and decide which issues are meaningful and worth exploring further? Ms. Ewing.
Every issue is meaningful and worth exploring further, at least from the very beginning of that. And I actually said that earlier. I think that every idea is important and worth listening to. The way to gather information in a world with all this technology is still kind of difficult because you don't know which ones people have access to, right? So like I said earlier, Philomena sends emails often, but we're not getting the response from that. So we have to find additional ways, whether that be social media, because right now that's huge, right? Even our kids would know what was going on if we use social media. There is a Think program that I know the school board already uses to gather ideas and get information from there. But what I really think is important is that we continue having these open forums for ideas and discussions. And with Zoom being available and Google Meet being available and all those different things, I do think it's a wonderful opportunity to just open up the walls. Nobody should feel like they're outside of this community at this point with everything that we've learned from COVID. We have a lot of things to discuss and worry about. So for me personal, when you say what issues are meaningful, I always want to hear it all. And then from there, as a group, as a school board, we can, pick and choose which ones to address first. I'm sure that there are some with more urgency than others. For example, bullying or harassment, like Asa was saying earlier, those things, we can't wait on that. That's not something that could be pushed to the back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strout.
Yeah, so again, going back to being a community advocate in Livermore, it's all about talking to people, reaching people, and reaching people isn't just having a conversation outside a coffee shop. It's, having surveys. It is sending emails and getting feedback. There's all sorts of channels that we can reach out to people to collect information. And, like Hannah said, every issue is important to somebody, and it's about trying to identify a priority right now, because, without unlimited resources, we need to make sure that we are addressing the issues that are most important. And that doesn't necessarily mean to the great, like 50 people said this, 20 people said this, do what the 50 is. It's also using a little bit of your intuition to determine what's really going to be important going forward. But it is also it's a little bit that, it's being scientific. So I know we have the thought exchange program that allows the school board, the school district to analyze comments coming in. That's a great start, and taking that and utilizing that application a little bit further to get scientific feedback and almost kind of turning it into a pseudo poll to see based off of demographics, age, student grade level is what's important. Start dissecting those issues and looking at them in different categories. I've done that with my work, just analyzing our customer survey responses. Hey, this person's got an issue. Let's take a look at it. And then see if we can find that issue across the board and determine if there's a priority that we need to address. But like I said, first and foremost, it's all about talking to people. I can't wait for an era where we can actually start meeting in person again, because that's kind of, my biggest strength is I'm a people person and I like talking to people. And, I've taken that conversation and moved it to social media to talk to people, which social media, not a good place to have a really significant conversation, but it's a good place to start and to get an idea where people are. There's going to be a lot of angry people up there. There's going to be a lot of positive people up there, but there's still a conversation to be had there. And you can take that and bring it in. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman.
Yes. I'm an advocate for building trust. Building trust and building authentic relationships, and that really begins by how you treat the other individual or individuals and how you make them feel. And you come in to listen. You come in to learn. And, you know, we all have biases, but let's not lead with those biases. And I've been guilty of it too, but I've learned now that, you know, when, and Maya Angelou, the American poet, she has the saying, she goes, you may not remember their name, but you definitely remember how they made you feel. And I hold on to that wholeheartedly, because if I can build trust, then I build confidence, then I build the opportunity to have those difficult conversations, or those, it's real talk now. And let's figure this out. And now I trust you. I want to work with you. I have your back. Let's move forward. So again, and it's finding different communities. It's, there are some communities that feel more powerful and know how to, again, navigate our system. And there are others that don't. But that's not a disservice. I mean, we can go out and recruit, promote. We have to be more active in that, and making those connections, because if we really want everyone's perspective, we got to put in the work. And I'm not afraid of putting in the work.
Thank you. Ms. Wong.
So an interesting thing in running for school board is I've learned how little people know about school board, what it does and what it doesn't do. People range from asking me, where do I vote for that, to wanting to give me a wish list. And so I think part of it is sort of explaining to people what the process is. If there's something that's not working for you, here's how you make it work. And they don't know, these are city council issues, these are school board issues. Their emails, phone numbers, how to reach them, it's on the website. And that's where you start. And having spent my 30 plus years as a policy advocate when I worked in DC or here in the Bay Area, that's always how we started. Sometimes I knew nobody in a city we were working in. You go and look them up and you call them, and if I don't live there, then they're less likely to talk to me. But if you're a constituent, they have to listen to you, and they want to, because like I keep saying this tonight, but if you're the person with the problem, you're the one with the solution. And that's why I, as a governing, serving on a governing body, would want to hear from those people, because it'll help make our school district better. If we hear what the problems are, we can work with them to find the solutions. It makes our schools better. And just one quick lesson from my policy advocacy world, since COVID, a lot of our legislators are doing their meetings with they usually have some sort of open office hours day where you can show up and talk to their staff. And now they're doing it by Zoom, and it's so efficient. It's never been easier, because you go in there, you're in a Zoom waiting room for 5 minutes, you get to your staff person, you talk to them for 15 minutes about what you want, and you're done. And I never left my house, and the whole thing took 20 minutes. Before, it would have been I have to drive somewhere, I have to wait, I talk to them, and now I've lost half a day. So implementing something similar to that would be pretty easy to do. We can have, school board office hours via Zoom. That's how we're going to know what's working and what isn't, and just keep making our schools better.
Thank you. Mr. Rogie.
Well, as a school board member, and what I've done in the past and has continued to help me, is meet people in person. What I'm finding out with COVID is when I talk to people, I can't tell their inflections and what they're telling me. I can't tell if they're smiling. I can't tell if they're sticking their tongue out at me. When I talk to the community, I do this by going to multiple PTA meetings, being members of different PTAs and PTOs, standing in the background, listening to the conversations, going to open school nights, listening to parents talk. I get a good feeling of what's going on and what's not going on well, and what's going on really well. But I think one of my best sources is, I also coach track at Livermore High School, is when I'm finding out there's a problem at the high school, or I think there was a problem, or I've heard that there's a problem, I ask the students. And amazingly enough, as many times as I talk to my athletes, I say, oh, that's not a big deal. And I went, really? I'm hearing so much. No, that was it just wasn't anything big deal about it. And I said, well, I don't understand. Outside of this, he said, well, parents and educators like to blow this up. Oh, and on the other side of that, sometimes I'll just ask how school's going, and then I find out, oh my gosh, there's a problem brewing, and nobody knows about it. But with all that coming together, you really don't know how big a problem really is until you put it to a place that can bring all that information together. And one of our things that we do is to get all our information back to the superintendent. That's who we go back to with our information. And then she'll see a trend or a problem or confirm that this has been going on. And this is how we get better information and how we're going to have a solution or a better program. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. I believe we're on question number 9. Am I correct? Okay. So for this question, everyone, you get 3 minutes to answer. It is our last question. Mr. Strout will go first. For the last question, you have 3 minutes to provide us with any additional thoughts and ideas that are not already addressed, that you believe will contribute to the success of our students, teachers, and families. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to end by, saying thank you to the PCIC for hosting this forum. It's been really great, really well run. I'll be the first to admit that I was concerned about it being in person, but I think a lot of other people were. So there's not a lot of people here in attendance, which is, good and bad, I hope. So, I think that leads into what we can start doing better is to start sharing information in more channels. Because right now we there's an email list, which is great. But not everybody looks at their email, or some people get too many emails and they miss things. So we need to start looking at avenues of reaching out to people, and that does involve going to where the people are. And as toxic as it is, Facebook is where a majority of the people are, and we need to start reaching out to the parents there, and making sure that we're sharing information on as many channels as possible, because then we're going to catch different audiences based off the channel that we're reaching. And so I think that's one of the biggest things to go forward with in terms of that we haven't addressed already, because we've addressed a lot tonight. And then another thing that hasn't really been addressed is, how involved that I will be as a school board member if elected. I plan on being the community advocate still by reaching out to people in person, meeting as many people as possible, holding little mini town halls when we can, either virtual or in person when we can, and engaging with people on social media in a way that doesn't violate the Brown Act, but engaging with people on social media, because again, that's where they are. And so if I expect to be an accessible school board member, then I need to be there and be accessible. And that's not just via email or a phone call. It's being accessible on as many channels as I can for my constituents. So to end it, I just want to reiterate that, if I am elected, I will be that candidate who will be fighting for that transparency and being accessible. I will be that candidate who will be fighting to address the inequities that we've are seeing within our city and across the state and nation. I will also be looking to address some of the technology issues that we're having, not just within the students and getting the issue, but like making sure that we're prioritizing the upgrades of our infrastructure in an equitable way, so that those schools that we mentioned that aren't getting as much love as the other ones in terms of the community perspective, now we can start communicating and say, hey, we've updated X, Y, and Z at the school, and not just tell our parents and teachers, but tell the city. The city needs to know about how well we're doing, so that the city can start recommending, oh, you can live anywhere in Livermore and be successful with your kids and not have to worry about living in a certain area. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman.
Yeah, so additional thought. Sorry, just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'm listening to what Asa said about, I was chuckling when you said the toxicity of Facebook, I have a love-hate relationship with that. But also to just, again, I can talk from my experience and from my experiences growing up. Again, I came from a home who valued education and stressed it, and my parents just didn't know how. And so there are those parents in our community that value education, they just don't know how. And so how can I contribute to the success is I can contribute by offering to teach those parents to how to advocate, how to ask the right questions, how to, conduct oneself, and just give them the skill set that they need so that they can better support their children at home. And again, it's demystifying the perception that, I'll speak for my community, that we don't care, because I do hear that. And again, I'm going to talk, Asa mentioned that the schools, I remember when I was enrolling my child at 2 Junction, for kindergarten, the responses that I was getting from some parents is like, oh, you must not have lived in Livermore long enough to know that that's not the school you should go to. And I specifically asked for an inter-district transfer because I am very happy with the program, the dual immersion program, and my entire experience there. But again, changing those narratives of what happens in some of these areas, that's my goal, is to strengthen and to change the narratives of some schools, some groups, so that we all can foster and do well and be successful in our learning. And then it then sets you up, right? Sets you up for the rest of your life to gain that economic mobility.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wong.
This is a very serious time for our schools and for anyone who has any responsibility over schools, and it's the reason I've decided to run. I have 30 years of experience. This is a natural progression for me to be on a school board, to work on school policy. Everything I've done in my career, in my personal life, I can bring to the table, and I'm ready to go to work from day one. I already have the relationships. I know the process. Public school is everything to me. I came here as an immigrant, speaking no English. My parents didn't have college degrees. I worked in the family business growing up. And my public school and my public library, I always say, are the 2 keys to my success in life. I got a master's degree at Harvard, and I remember calling my parents and saying, I got accepted at Harvard. And my dad cried and said it was all worth it, all his years of struggle in America. It was worth it. And that success came about not because they knew how to go to college or they could help me with whatever. It was because of my strong public schools, and I want Livermore students to have that same thing. And having been a parent in this district, having seen my children go through elementary school, middle school, high school, I have a lot of ideas for things we can do to enhance it. And all my ideas come with funding attached, funding ideas. Because I know in this climate, I can't just dream up a whole bunch of crazy things. I want to keep building on what's great about our district, which is choice. I love that we are an open enrollment district with all kinds of options for families. The fact that my 2 children attended 2 different high schools it's a testament to that they each found a school that was right for them and that they've been very happy at. And, we have bilingual education program. We have an IB school. You can go to the school that works for you. And I want to keep building on that. I have ideas for promoting programs, enhancing them across the district in our schools to serve all kinds of students. That's what I love about Livermore, is that compared to our neighboring districts, we're not just trying to educate one type of student. We don't just care about the 5.0 AP student who wants to go to Yale. We care about all kinds of students and making school work for all of them. And I love that about us. I mean, that's my favorite thing and the proudest thing of being a Livermore resident, Livermore parent, and hopefully a Livermore school board trustee is I want to keep building on that success.
Thank you. Mr. Rogie.
Well, one thing I changed in the bottom line of that is that I believe that we contribute to the continued success of our students and teachers and families. We've implemented a lot of programs and that help with our success for our students and our teachers. One of the things I want to expand on, and it's been pointed out in this distance learning, is we need to train our teachers further on distance learning. Our teachers are our most important part of this whole equation, and they're struggling with it, and I think we need to pull back a little bit and spend more time getting them trained so they're more comfortable and not so stressed to making sure that their students are getting the education that they had prior to the pandemic. The other one is I've always liked the idea of outreach, where we meet in a rotating area, a rotation throughout different schools with different board members and different staff members, and also trade staffs at different schools and talk to others, students in certain schools and their parents to find out what's different about their school versus this school and try to integrate all the information. We do tend to have our cliques in schools. My daughter went to Sunset. It was a total different school than going over to Croce. I appreciated both schools. But you find out where their successes lie and you start to move them to other areas. Parents and teachers don't mind that because it makes them better. So with that, I've got a lot of experience on the board. I'm not going to dwell on that. And I think that makes me a very good candidate to continue the success. But again, I think everybody up here on the dais would make an excellent addition to the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very nice. Ms. Ewing?
So, as I said earlier, my three major things to target were safety, equity, and whole student development. And I think that the most successful way that we're going to reach that is through communication. And so in doing my best to use social media as a tool and talking to Livermore residents and just even some teacher friends that I know, I asked three main questions, and that is, what is our district doing well? What can they improve on? And what do you want to see more of? And, you know, you get a whole lot of different responses, right? Some people will say, we have a great district, nothing needs to change. Some people will say, oh, I don't like it. But then when you follow up with, well, what don't you like? Or, you know, what can you do to improve? They don't typically have an answer. And in saying that, my response is always, well, when's the last time you've been to a board meeting to get your concerns out there and heard? So I'm really hoping that this year, since everyone is a lot more aware of what it means to vote and what it means to be involved in community, that we'll have a lot more people come out and vote. We're going to have a lot more people participate. And school board will be this well-rounded area where everyone feels a part of it. And I think that that's the main goal in helping Livermore become totally unified. Additionally, I was asked the question by a realtor, you know, when I'm trying to sell houses and I'm trying to sell to Livermore, and of course they ask what the best districts are. And when Livermore falls behind Livermore and Dublin, you know, they are wanting to move to Pleasanton. And what do you think the difference is between our school district and Dublin and Pleasanton School District? And my answer to her was really short and simple. And I said, I think what it is, you know, money plays a big part in what a school district looks like. And while Livermore is not a poor community, I think we need to work on getting more money via grants and bonds and donations from people who have money to give to make sure that we can compete. And I also think included in that, we need to make sure that we are paying attention to our marginalized students that we talked about earlier. We need to make sure that we're helping them improve their test scores. We need to make sure that we're helping them not just meet the minimum, but excel. Because once we get to that point, I think that's where Livermore is really going to show off exactly what we have and exactly who we are.
Thank you.
You guys made it. Can you hear me? There we are. Can you hear me? Yep. All right. I'd like to close this forum by thanking all the candidates for their participation. I'd also like to thank the audience for your attendance this evening. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact candidates directly. You'll find contact information and additional materials as you exit. Thank you to Ellen Gould for serving as our moderator this evening, and Susan Muckner for assisting. Also, thank you to all the folks that have assisted behind the scenes to make this happen. To the voters, please remember to vote on or by Tuesday, November 3rd. Go to acvote.org for more information. Thank you, and have a good night.